Folks, we're just a few days away from the college football playoff and the madness and the mania that's going to come with it. And how are these 4 games going to break down? And I got all the answers for you. That's right. Just gather around, sit back, enjoy the next 20 minutes of your life, because I'm going to tell you exactly how, when, where, and why these teams are going to win or why they're not going to win. And we've got some maybe, just maybe, some surprises and an upset here for you in the second round. Something that I wasn't thinking before, but could be thinking now. You're just going to have to wait here. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with Ole Miss vs. Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Well, folks, if there's one thing that history tells us here in the Sugar Bowl, that it's very challenging to beat a team that you've already beaten the regular season again in the Sugar Bowl. That's right. It's happened a few times in the past. Most, especially, you'll remember the Florida State of 1997. That's right. Florida State won the regular matchup. Florida came back and won in the Sugar Bowl, won the national championship. And we actually have Ole Miss in one of these games way back in 1959 against LSU. Same thing kind of happened there, where Ole Miss lost a game in the regular season, then turned around and won that game in the Sugar Bowl. We've also saw a tie here where the team came back and won, but we can't count that. So anyways, we're going to break down this Georgia and Ole Miss game, and it really boils down here, folks. What is going to be the factor here of Lane Kiffin not being in this football game? We didn't see a lot of changes last week when Tulane came into Ole Miss. It looked like the exact same game that we saw earlier in the season. It was 45-10. Now it's 42-10. Whatever. Same score, same outcome there. But what are we going to see different here in this Ole Miss team that we didn't necessarily see on the road earlier in the season in Athens at Georgia, where they end up winning the football game early, but then coming back and losing it at the end in the third quarter? That's right. They took a 9-point lead, but they couldn't keep it in the second half and ended up losing that football game. So where do we think Trinidad Chambliss can take advantage of this Georgia defense? And I don't know. Listen, I'm not in love with this Georgia defense. I haven't been in love with this Georgia defense. I think people are giving them a lot of props the last few weeks because how they played against Alabama in that SEC championship game. I'm not putting a lot into that. I mean, Alabama was down 10 players in that game. Georgia got the blocked punt, which really changed things in the direction of that football game. Ty Simpson still didn't have a bad football game that day against Georgia. Overall, he still threw for some yardage. We look back at Georgia against Georgia Tech, and again, lackluster performance offensively by Georgia, a team in Georgia Tech that was giving up big points all year, and Georgia could only muster 16 points against that team. So I really think the home field advantage that Georgia had in the first game is going to be, minimized here in the Sugar Bowl. We also need to see Key one, Lacey, have a big game here this time against Georgia. He didn't have a great game last time. He had 31 yards rushing in that game. He did have 2 TDs against Georgia, but overall, 12 carries for 31 yards wasn't going to do it. Trinidad Chambliss was the game record there for Georgia in the first game. He had over 300 yards total offense in that game. And, if he could have got some in the fourth quarter, they just didn't possess the ball against Georgia. And that's really what it came down to. Georgia was able to score, and Ole Miss just couldn't get the ball for long enough to move it. So I'm not 100% sold on this Georgia team. I have picked Georgia to win this game in my initial bracket. I am thinking, Kirby Smart is 4-0 in games where he's had a rematch against an opponent. Now, 3 of those 4 games, he had lost early in the first matchup, and then he won in the second matchup. Only last year, they beat Texas in the first game of the season, or the first matchup of the season last year, and then turn around and beat them in the SEC championship game. So they did beat Texas twice in one year, but normally Kirby's coming off of a loss against a team that then he's rematching against. So we'll see if he can go 5-0 here against a team that he's already beaten once this year in the rematch. So we'll see how that works out for Kirby and what the history shows us in that. I really think this game again, is going to come down to, can Ole Miss score like they scored early, for the first 3 quarters of the game against Georgia, and can they keep Georgia, kind of off balance defensively and, make Georgia, Georgia's not a great run football team right now. Yes, they've had some really strong running games, most especially against Mississippi State, but we're not going to call that one of the powerful SEC defenses here. So I think really Ole Miss needs to shut down the big plays that Gunner Stockton can make with his arm, but he does it, very, very seldomly in a game. So you're only going to have to worry about it 1 or 2, 3 times at most, where he's going to really press the ball down the field, in my opinion. So Trinidad Chambliss is going to need to have the game of his life here. He had 300 yards in the first game. We'll see if he can duplicate that again. And Kewan Lacey is going to need to have 100-plus yards rushing in this football game for Ole Miss to have any chance of winning this game. Now, in my initial bracket that I put out before the college football playoffs started, I took Georgia to win this football game. And I still think I'm going to sit with that. But don't be surprised if the red and blue of the Ole Miss Rebels come out and absolutely shock and surprise everybody in this Sugar Bowl. I'm not going to call for it right this second, but I'm not going to put it past them. But I do think overall Georgia here is probably going to win this game somewhere. I don't think it'll be as high scoring as the first affair. I think we're looking at something like a 28-24, maybe 24-21 type of game in this 3 to 4 point game here with Georgia winning. But don't be surprised if Ole Miss doesn't come out and just play hair on fire. What do they got to lose? Trinidad Chambliss could be his last game in college football. He is trying to get the red shirt back from his days at Ferris State. So we'll see how that goes. But overall, I really do think Georgia wins this football game in a closer game than expected by some. I don't think it'll be anywhere near the 9 points it was in the first game. So I'm going to go ahead and say Georgia. I'm going to go 27-23, Georgia over Ole Miss. Oregon vs. Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl. Is the Texas Tech defense really for real? Or is this all just smoke and mirrors because they play in the Big 12? That's the question that's going to be answered, folks, when Oregon and Texas Tech match up in the Orange Bowl. I don't know that we can honestly, truthfully tell ourselves that this Texas Tech defense is the number 1 rush defense in the country because they play in the Big 12. Is it the number 3 total defense in the country because they play in the Big 12? And is it, quite frankly, the number 24 pass defense because it plays in the Big 12? I don't know. This is a defense that has given up 23 total points in its last 4 games. So you got to say, wow, that's very impressive. But then you also got to look at it as they play in the Big 12. Yes, Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker, Bronco Nagurski award winner, the absolute turnover machine. He's forced 11 turnovers this season, 4 interceptions and 7 forced fumbles. So they obviously do something right on defense, but is all of this because they play in the Big 12? Now, we will say this. Most of the teams that they play against in the Big 12 are nowhere near the caliber of the Oregon Ducks. That's right. The Oregon Ducks are a whole different breed of duck here than what Texas Tech has been out shooting earlier in the season. The answer is no. Texas Tech's defense is not the quality defense that the rankings show. But that doesn't mean that they can't beat an Oregon Ducks team. But I think at the end of this game, we are going to be saying, Well, it was a typical Big 12 defense that looked good in the Big 12, but when they get out against guys the caliber of Oregon, they're just not going to be able to get it done. And that really, honestly, folks, is what I think is going to happen in this football game. Dante Moore has too many weapons at his disposal to beat this Texas Tech Red Raider defense. And I'm just not going to buy the love affair with this defense in Rodriguez and the Nagurski Award winner and all of that stuff. I'm going to say Oregon, they're getting their weapons healthier and healthier as the weeks go by. Yes, Dak Moore had one catch in the game against James Madison, but that's more than he had in the prior games. We are going to see these two tight ends have a field day here against this Texas Tech linebacking core. Look, this is an aggressive defense, and I just don't think they're going to be as aggressive as they want to be when they're going to have to cover these dangerous tight ends that Oregon has. And I just don't see them shutting down this running game, led by Noah Whittingham. I just don't think that this team, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, have the defense that their rankings show on paper because they played in the Paper Tiger Big 12. So there you go. I got Oregon here. Again, I'm not going to say dominating this football game, but I think that Oregon comfortably wins this football game, moves on to the next round. I think we all sit back and look and say, hey, this Texas Tech defense was pretty good, again, when they played who they played. But when they get up against competition, equal, better, talent-wise across the board, that competition is going to beat this Texas Tech defense. And I'm going to go Oregon here. I'm looking at something, I'm thinking 31-17, 31-21. We'll go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt. Can Morton, Morton has been, he's looked great this season at sometimes, quarterback for Texas Tech. But I just don't know when he plays up against a team like Oregon if he's going to be able to have the results. 31-20 here. Oregon goes ahead and takes the Texas Tech Red Raiders out in the Orange Bowl. And I'm going to say that the walkaway thought is the Texas Tech defense just wasn't what we were sold the bill of goods on because it plays in the Big 12. Alabama versus Indiana in the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. How productive can the Hoosiers defense be without Stephen Daly? That's right, folks. Stephen Daly leads Power 4 conferences, 19 tackles for loss. Yes, this is the kid that got injured stupidly by jumping up and down, trying to high-five the fans after the Big Ten championship game when Indiana had just thought they had won the Super Bowl by beating my Ohio State Buckeyes in the Big Ten championship game. What's he do? He injures himself. Now, how is this Indiana defense going to recover from that injury? 19 tackles for loss. That's right. I've already told you, second in the country, first in Power 4 conference. This is not going to be something that Indiana can replace this position, and it is going to be the detriment to them in this football game. Now, remember in my first bracket that I released, I had Oklahoma beating Alabama, but I also had Oklahoma beating Indiana in the second round. So now, with this loss of Stephen Daly, and listen, folks, you can say what you want about how impactful is it going to be. It's going to be damn impactful because this is a guy that played every single down in the Big Ten championship. There is no backup for this guy. This is a transfer from Kent State last year. Yeah, that's right. I said it. The Golden Flash is Kent State. This is the guy they brought in to play this position, and there is no backup. on this team that's going to have any type of production anywhere close to him. And he is a big part of the game-wrecking front four of this Indiana defense, and it is going to be absolutely dire for them because they are not going to be able to replace this guy. So here's what I think. I think Indiana's back end of the defense plays right into Ty Simpson's hands. This is a team, like to play cover defenses, not a real man-to-man defense overall, but I think that is exactly what plays into Ty Simpson's favor. He is really good against zone defenses. I don't think Indiana will be able to pressure without Stephen Daly like Oklahoma did in the first game especially and force Ty Simpson into mistakes. I think Ty Simpson is going to make enough plays to move the offense here for Alabama. And then the question will be, how good is Fernando Mendoza going to be coming off of his Heisman run here, winning the Heisman? Only two guys have ever won the Heisman in a national championship here in this century, and that would be Jameis Winston and Cam Newton. They won the Heisman and the national championship. Is Fernando Mendoza capable of doing that? I don't know yet. I think he'll make a mistake or two that's going to cost him in this football game. I think Alabama, coming off the Georgia loss in the SEC championship game, a lot of people counted Alabama out, but a lot of people didn't take into account that this was a team that, quite frankly, kind of knew they were going to be in the college football playoff. They were down 10 starters. The game just kind of went awry for them. They had to block punt and da-da-da-da-da. And, Georgia just jumped on them, and then they were able to beat Oklahoma after dropping down 17 points. A couple dumb plays by John Mateer led Alabama back into that football game. But overall, they came back. Ty Simpson looked great. He didn't even have but one throw really to Ryan Williams with one catch for 5 yards. So how impactful is Ryan Williams going to be in this game? Indiana's 18th in the country in overall pass defense. I really, really think that Ty Simpson is going to be able to move the ball against this Indiana defense throwing the football. I don't think you can say that Ohio State. Julian Sainz still had a really good game throwing the football against Indiana. It really came down to inconsistencies by Ryan Day and that offense inside the red zone that cost him that game. So I think Alabama, the running game is coming back for Alabama. Yes, Jam Miller, did play in that game against Oklahoma. He wasn't super productive in that game, had minimal carries, but he should be more healthy going into this game. And again, Alabama doesn't need to rush for 150 yards. If they can get 50, 60 yards on the ground, that'll be enough for them to potentially win this game. So what do I think is going to happen here? Again, I told you I thought Oklahoma would beat Indiana in this game. I think the pressure's on Indiana. I think the Rose Bowl, the pageantry, the injury to Stephon Daly, the Heisman hype that Fernando's been getting. Hell, he's on TikTok every other minute talking about something or other. So bottom line here is I think Alabama is going to be ready and tested to win this football game. The question, can they force Mendoza into mistakes? And I think they will be able to force Fernando into at least one critical error in this football game that's going to give Alabama a decent chance. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call the upset here. I'm going to take Alabama to squeak out a win here over Indiana, 31-28 at the Rose Bowl. And I think what it really boiled down to is Indiana's defense, again, will not be as productive without Stephen Daly at that end position. And Alabama is going to be able to slow down the pass rush of Indiana, giving Ty Simpson enough time to throw the ball in just enough rushing yards, 55 over-under on that. If you're thinking about placing a bet, I just guessed that. You can look it up. I don't get those bets in Ohio. So anyways, I'm going to go Alabama 31, Indiana 28 in the Rose Bowl. Miami vs. Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Will Ryan Day let his playmakers get the ball here in this game against the Miami Hurricanes? That's right, folks. It sure looked like he was holding his playmakers back in that game against Indiana. You can go back, which I did, and watch that game multiple times. We had Jeremiah Smith lined up at the 5-yard line with single coverage, no safety, crowding the line, and we didn't even take a chance to throw to the best receiver. And I say we, I mean Ohio State. They didn't take a chance to throw to the best receiver in that position, single coverage. Could have ran a slant, could have ran it out, could have did anything, but he didn't. They just ran the ball, and they didn't score. And that's where I wonder what Ryan Day has been holding back on with this offense inside the red zone and not letting the playmakers have opportunities. Hell, most of the time he throws the playmakers on the bench and brings in 3 and 4 tight end sets here. So how is Ryan Day going to change up the game plan? Now he's playing or calling the plays. That's right. We heard it out of Ryan Day's mouth. Hartline is just going to work with the receivers as he transitions to his job at USF. And Ryan Day will be making the calls on the field here against the Miami Hurricanes. Now, what is Miami going to try to do here against Ohio State to be successful in stopping this offense inside the outside of the red zone? Because Ohio State is very productive outside of the red zone. They're not as productive inside the red zone. Well, obviously, they've got Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesdion, the 2 game wreckers on the defensive ends. They accounted for 3.5 sacks against Texas A&M. Overall, this defense on the front line is going to be one of the better ones that Ohio State has played this season. Obviously, Indiana they've played. Michigan, can never count out Michigan's defensive line. They did play Penn State, who has players on the defensive line. They just, didn't have a great season overall for that team. But really, at the end of the day here, how disruptive can Ruben Bain and Akeem be against this Ohio State offensive line? That's going to be the real question going into this week. Another real question is going to be, how can the back end of Miami's defense slow down this passing attack with Julian Sayin and Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis? I don't know. Yes, they've been ball hawkishly a little bit here throughout the season and getting some interceptions and things, but overall, they're 30th in the country in passing yards allowed this year. I really think that this could be a heyday if Ryan Day lets them open up this offense. We're going to find out exactly, I think, early in the game how Ryan Day is going to call this game. We're going to see how good that back end of this defense is, and we're going to see if Miami's front can get the pressure needed to make Julian Sayin get uncomfortable. When it comes to Miami having the football, obviously, Miami's offensive line is extremely, extremely good. No question about that. But they haven't seen anywhere near the caliber of Ohio State's and, across the board. We've got Caden Curry on one side and Kenyatta Jackson on the other. The one thing I will say about these 2 guys is they've been getting held all year long in the Big Ten. Big Ten officials refuse to call holding on the opposing team when Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson are being held. We're going to have non-Big Ten officials in this game, and they're going to call these holding calls if Miami can't handle these 2. Kenyatta Jackson was an absolute wrecking force in that Indiana game. The problem was he was getting held over and over and over again on plays that he was pressuring. And then we got Caden McDonald in the middle. Old McDonald had a farm, and he didn't let you run anywhere up the middle against this guy. So I really think that Miami is going to have a very, very difficult time handling Ohio State's defensive front. And then the truth of the matter is, yes, it was windy last week, and Carson Beck didn't throw a lot down the field there at A&M. But we haven't seen Carson Beck super great down the field all year. He's had some moments, but he's also had some big interceptions this year that when he's been throwing down the field. So we're going to see how well Carson Beck can play. This is going to be a much more controlled environment. Obviously, it's indoors, so he won't have to deal with the wind. I still don't know that this is going to be an advantage for Carson Beck against Ohio State's secondary. I just don't see it coming that way. So I think what we're going to see here overall, I think we're going to see an Ohio State team that is coming out here. The defensive line is going to be dominant. And yes, I think Miami's defensive line is going to be good too in this game. But I think Ohio State's will be better. I think Ohio State will be able to throw the ball down the field on Miami, something that they, didn't do. I wouldn't say they didn't do against Indiana, but they didn't do it as well as they're going to do it this week against Miami. And I really think this game's going to come down to Ohio State winning by 13 or more points, in my opinion, on this. Obviously, Mark Fletcher Jr.'s got to get going for Miami on the running game. Big game last week, 172 yards. But the 3 games prior to that, he combined for a minimal 133 yards in 3 games, and then he busts out for 172 yards against that Texas A&M defense, which, again, thought was a lot of fraudulent throughout the season, and it showed up in that football game. Now, Malachi Toney is obviously going to be the biggest threat down the field for the Miami Hurricanes, and can Ohio State cover him and not let him get a big play down the field and on the punt and kick returns? This guy's a dangerous, dangerous returner. So overall, I think Ohio State going to pull this game out. I'm going to go with 34-21 here. Ohio State beats Miami in the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Eve. All right, folks. Well, there are my 4 predictions here for the second round of the college football playoff. And let's just recap them real quick. I got Georgia beating Ole Miss here in about a 3-point game here in the Sugar Bowl. I got Alabama surprising Indiana and winning this game in the Rose Bowl somewhere around 31-28. I have got Ohio State beating the Miami Hurricanes 34-21 here in a pretty lopsided game after it gets going. And then I got the Oregon Ducks manhandling Texas Tech and showing that Texas Tech defense was really just a Big 12 defense and not really a top defense in the country. So there we go. Big weekend, or big New Year's middle of the week. 2 days there, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We'll be back the following weekend to recap those games. Remember, gather around in ALTT. We'll see you soon.